Good morning, I'm Kenneth Bogan.
And I'm Janae Norman. Here are the top 5 things to know this Wednesday. Number 1, the impeachment showdown escalating.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is firing back at President Trump after the White House refused to cooperate with the impeachment investigation, claiming it's illegitimate. Pelosi says the president is not above the law and will be held accountable.
Democrats also subpoenaed the U.S. ambassador to the European Union after the White House blocked him from testifying.
Number 2, the massive power shutoff in California.
People across the state have been stocking up ahead of planned power outages that could last for days. Electricity started being cut overnight to nearly 1 million customers.
It's a precaution to prevent power lines from sparking wildfires during heavy rain.
On to number 3. A 9-year-old boy is being charged with murder in connection with a deadly house fire in Illinois.
5 people died when a mobile home caught fire in April. Investigators are not revealing the relationship between the boy and the victims, which include 3 children and 2 adults.
Authorities will only say that the fire was intentionally set. Neighbors say the family is still trying to cope with the arrest.
I think that he should be followed well into his 30s or 40s. You know, he should be on probation for a long time for this. It shouldn't just be till he's 18.
The boy is charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder.
The prosecutor calls the decision heavy, saying, quote, "It's a tragedy, but at the end of the day, it is charging a very young person with one of the most serious crimes we have."
Number 4, the CDC reports that sexually transmitted diseases have reached record highs across the U.S.
More than 2.4 million syphilis, gonorrhea, and chlamydia infections were reported last year. That's an all-time high since data on all 3 conditions were first collected in 1984.
Health experts blame the spike on several factors, including a decline in condom use and cuts to sexual health programs.
And finally, number 5, a woman who played the ultimate cheesy joke on her dad.
Sarah Smith pinned a Cheez-It to the dining room wall to see how long it would take her father to notice, and he finally did about 4 years later.
The Cheez-It disappeared Sunday night. The joke has gone viral online. Some accuse Smith of making the whole thing up, saying that Cheez-It couldn't last that long.
But Smith points out this was in Vermont, where it's too cold for bugs most of the year. It might be a real whodunit. Somebody might have just taken that off and popped it in their mouth.
Or Cheez-Its just last a long time, like Twinkies.
Oh, that's true. Good morning. Let's get right to that big story. The impeachment showdown taking a new turn just hours after the White House said it will no longer cooperate with the investigation. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is putting President Trump on notice.
In a new letter, Pelosi warns the president that he will be held accountable. Meanwhile, Democrats have now subpoenaed a top diplomat after the White House blocked his testimony. ABC's Inez de la Quatara has the new details. Inez, good morning.
Good morning, Janae and Kenneth. As the White House grows increasingly defiant, House Democrats are pushing on, warning the president that any attempt to stonewall will be used against him as evidence of obstruction.
In a scathing letter to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the White House declaring it will not cooperate with the impeachment inquiry, writing the investigation is dangerous, illegitimate, and a violation of fundamental fairness. Pelosi responding overnight, calling the president's decision only the latest attempt to cover up his betrayal of our democracy and to insist that the president is above the law, setting the stage for a showdown between the White House and Congress as the State Department blocked the U.S. ambassador to the European Union, Gordon Sondland, from testifying on Capitol Hill.
The failure to produce this witness, the failure to produce these documents, we consider yet additional strong evidence of obstruction.
Sondland reportedly worked behind the scenes to help carry out Trump's wishes in Ukraine. House Democrats have now issued a subpoena for Sondland's testimony and documents. Meanwhile, ABC News is learning a White House official who listened in on Trump's phone call with the president of Ukraine described it as crazy and frightening. This, according to that whistleblower at the heart of the impeachment inquiry. According to a Washington Post Schar School poll, 58% of Americans now support impeachment, up from 37% in July. But the president's strongest supporters are still standing by him.
What we see in this impeachment is a kangaroo court, and Chairman Schiff is acting like a malicious Captain Kangaroo.
Both sides now gearing up for a long fight, with the White House tapping former South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy to serve as legal counsel to the president during impeachment proceedings. Janae and Kenneth.
All right, Inez in Washington, thank you.
Police have now arrested 2 suspects in the death of a key witness at the murder trial of a former Dallas police officer. Investigators say Joshua Brown was shot during a drug deal. Authorities are criticizing community leaders for previously claiming that Brown's death was related to his testimony at the trial of former police officer Amber Geiger.
I assure you that is simply not true. And I encourage those leaders to be mindful of their actions moving forward, because their words have jeopardized the integrity of the city of Dallas as well as the Dallas Police Department.
Joshua Brown used to be Botham Jean's neighbor and contradicted Amber Geiger's testimony at trial. Geiger was sentenced to 10 years for John's murder.
New York State is reporting its first vaping-related death.
A 17-year-old from the Bronx died from a severe lung condition. He's believed to be the first teen in the U.S. to die from a vaping-related illness. The boy died Friday after being hospitalized twice in September. Meanwhile, another vaping death has been reported in California. More than 20 deaths have been reported nationwide.
First Lady Melania Trump is holding a listening session at the White House today. She'll hear directly from teens about vaping and e-cigarettes. Presidential candidate Bernie Sanders is scaling back his campaign schedule after suffering a heart attack last week.
There's still no word on when Sanders plans to resume campaigning, but he'll participate in next week's debate in Ohio.
The Sanders family is also mourning the loss of his daughter-in-law. Rain Riggs died Saturday from cancer at the age of 46. She was diagnosed shortly before her death. She leaves behind her husband and 3 children.
Now to the historic power outages overnight in California.
Yeah, the power company started shutting off electricity to nearly 1 million customers across the state because of high fire danger, and more outages are planned in 34 counties.
Now some businesses and medical facilities are scrambling, worried that these outages could last for days. Overnight, last-minute preparations in California before massive planned power outages.
My father-in-law did it this morning and reminded me to do this.
People stocking up on water and lining up at gas stations as the power company started shutting off electricity in anticipation of high winds that have the potential to spread wildfires. Forecasters predicting the strongest wind event in the region in 2 years.
I'm just charging all my phone chargers, and hopefully I have an extra cell phone at home, and I'm gonna hopefully use that as our connection to the world.
800,000 customers are expected to be affected, with the power being cut to people in more than half of the state's 58 counties. This map of the planned outages in Northern California shows nearly the entire Bay Area affected, except for downtown San Francisco and San Jose. Customers could be without power for up to 5 days.
There's a possibility they could restore power sooner, and I believe that really depends on how quickly they can get out and inspect lines.
Officials are hoping to avert wildfires caused by faulty lines in what's being called the largest preventive outage in state history. The widespread shutoff comes after investigators determined that the so-called Camp Fire last year, which killed 85 people and burned 153,000 acres, was sparked by power lines belonging to the utility PG&E. That fire led the company to file for bankruptcy after a $6.9 billion lawsuit payout. Back in the Bay Area, some health facilities are now asking PG&E to keep their power on during this week's planned outages.
We will make sure that patients get dialysis one way or the other, but this is not sustainable over a prolonged period of time.
But amid the concerns, some humor from police in the city of Pleasanton with a list of helpful reminders for residents, like keep your freezer and refrigerator doors closed to keep food from spoiling. If you have teenagers, this may be difficult.
And the strike at General Motors is now in its 4th week, and new numbers show the toll it's taking. An estimated 100,000 workers have now been affected by the walkout. That's more than double the number of workers actually on strike. It includes 75,000 auto supply workers who've either been laid off or had their pay cut.
And we're getting our first look at images of an amazing rescue near Italy. An ultralight plane, this one here, wound up tangled upside down in ski lift cables. This happened Sunday north of Milan. The pilot is in the hospital after being thrown from the cockpit onto one of the wings. His passenger was trapped inside. It took crews about 90 minutes to get them down. Well, mother and daughter in Texas are making college a family affair.
16-year-old Emma Earhart and mom Kathy attend the University of North Texas. Both are studying to become doctors. And this semester, Kathy is in every one of her daughter's classes. Each of them says the experience has made their relationship stronger.
It's a lot of fun. We're competitive in a fun way. Who did better on this? Who did better on that? So we challenge each other.
We've grown so close. We've become best friends.
Dad/husband Joe Earhart says each of them serves as the other's support system. Emma and Kathy are both working toward their doctorates, so pretty cool there.
Very cool. Well, coming up, the gaming pro banned from an esports tournament over support for protesters in Hong Kong.
But first, Turkish troops head to the border of Syria after U.S. troops pull back. What President Trump is saying after this.
Welcome back. A closely watched case that was finally argued at the Supreme Court comes down to one question. Does the federal civil rights law cover those in the LGBTQ community?
Justices heard 2 hours of lively arguments about the issue yesterday. Their ruling won't be handed down until early next summer. ABC's Brad Milkey joins us with details. Brad, good morning.
Yeah, that's right. Supreme Court observers have been telling us this is a hugely consequential year on the court. And yesterday, the justices heard perhaps their biggest case of this term. Activists from each side of the cultural conversation showed up in Washington to hear lawyers argue a couple cases on whether it is legal to fire someone because they're gay, lesbian, or transgender. Now, ABC's senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer was in that courtroom, so I asked him, there are federal protections for age, sex, race, disability, but there are no explicit protections for gay people, are there?
The plaintiffs in this case, Brad, argued yesterday that there are in plain sight. In fact, they are saying that discrimination on the basis of sex, which is written into the law, actually covers sexual orientation, gender identity, because both of those qualities are based on sex. In fact, the attorney for one of the plaintiffs in the cases before the court brought forward an example for the justices. Pam Carlin said, look, if you're a man and you are in love with or dating a woman, there's no problem with that in society right now. An employer would simply shrug. In fact, an employer would give you a couple days off if you got engaged or got married to go enjoy that honeymoon. But if you're a man and you're dating and in love with another man, as was the case with Gerald Bostock, Pam Carlin said, in this case, it resulted in him getting fired. And that's not okay. She said that's on the basis of sex.
Now, in the room, Devin said it kind of seemed like a toss-up, but this morning there are a lot of eyes on conservative Justice Neil Gorsuch, who seemed kind of sympathetic to the plaintiff's argument. However, he also wondered out loud about the ramifications for religious beliefs in this case. We'll have a lot more on Start Here later this morning. Listen on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcasting app. Janae, Kenneth?
Brad, thank you. Turkish troops are gathering along the Syrian border ahead of an expected invasion now that President Trump has pulled U.S. forces from a key border region. But the president insists he has not abandoned Kurdish fighters who've been instrumental in driving out ISIS. Let's go across the pond now to Julia McFarland in the London Bureau for the latest. Julia, good morning.
Morning, Kenneth. Yes, that's right. And the latest news we've just got this morning is that the Syrian Kurdish fighters have begun gathering their forces across on the other side of that border in response to that Turkish military buildup just over the other side. Now, it's unclear what is going to happen after this tense standoff. But yesterday, all the action was over in Washington because after President Trump announced his plans late over the weekend to withdraw U.S. troops from northern Syria, anticipating that Turkish military incursion, there was a storm of criticism, not just from Trump's opponents, but also from some of his longest-standing rival allies, his closest ally on the Hill, Senator Lindsey Graham, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, but also on this side of the pond, British parliamentarians raised the issue in the House of Commons, saying that the West owed the Kurds a debt of honor. Now, in a series of tweets, President Trump appeared to row back a little. He warned Turkey that if they did anything off limits, they would face devastating economic consequences, but also sought to reassure the Turks that they were an important NATO ally. He also added that the US was not going to betray the Kurds. So now all eyes are on that border to see what happens next, who makes the next move.
And in Iraq, Julia, violence has broken out amid protests over the past week, killing more than 100 people. This all shows no signs of cooling off. So what are these protests about?
Kenneth, this is really interesting. This has been happening for the last couple of weeks. A number of protests have sprung up across Iraq. Now, what is unusual about this is that these are not really sectarian protests in a country that has been very, very sectarian over the last few years. These are protests which have been led by mostly young men in their 20s, recent graduates from university who are unable to find jobs. They have all started protesting against government corruption, against rising costs of living, and they're protesting for jobs and clean water. Now, what has happened recently is that the security forces have met them with a very heavy-handed response. More than 100 people have been killed recently, and this is just a really worrying turnaround for Iraq, just 2 years after it declared victory against the Islamic State.
And sticking with coverage of protests, we've got another one in Ecuador where the president declared a curfew after being forced out of the capital. Sounds strange. These protests are being led by indigenous people. So what can you tell us about that, Julia?
Exactly. Now, these protests, as you say, they're led by indigenous groups. They've largely sprung up after fuel subsidies were removed recently, spiking the price of petrol up by 100% since last week when government subsidies were removed. Now, there were huge protests against this action. In fact, protesters stormed a lot of government buildings. So President Lenin Moreno, he imposed a government curfew, last night on government buildings in response to this, to try and quell those protests.
All right, Julia McFarland, thank you so much, my friend. Good to see you.
Thank you, Kenneth. And I just want to say congratulations on your promotion. I hope this means we're going to see you in the mornings a lot from now on. It's been really, really great working with you and really, really well deserved. So
Julia, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So sweet. And thank you for that Twitter shout out as well after the announcement was made.
Very well deserved.
I appreciate that. Thank you, friend.
All right, let's get a check of our notifications.
Yeah, starting with this video of a dolphin stampede off the coast of Southern California. I didn't even know it was called a stampede, but it is. And a pod of about 400 dolphins were racing above the water yesterday near Dana Point in a move called porpoising. Experts say it's the fastest travel mode for dolphins.
Pretty fast.
Yeah, they do it when they're scared or when there's food in the area. I've seen Janae run for food. She could beat those dolphins.
Looks a little bit like that. A woman's trip to Korea provided a lesson on why Cheetos are called dangerously cheesy.
She posted a video on Twitter showing TSA agents removing bags of flaming hot Cheetos from a Louis Vuitton bag to swab them. It included the message, "We'll never forget the day TSA stopped me because they thought I was hiding stuff inside my bag because all I had was like 20 bags of hot Cheetos." That's a direct quote. And she says she has so many because friends in Korea asked her to bring them.
Yeah, how embarrassing for them to open up that bag and they're just Cheetos.
Like, can I have some?
Lots of Cheetos.
Hey, starting tonight, Philadelphia hockey fans can let off some steam in the arena without getting in trouble.
The Flyers are unveiling what they call their disassembly room. Fans use bats, sledgehammers, and other weapons of limited destruction to smash up plates, TVs, mirrors, and other breakables. There's also an area where family and friends can watch the off-ice action. So Jared Leto has lost his head, literally.
The Oscar winner tells GQ that he thinks someone might have stolen this thing. Yep, Leto carried an exact replica of his head on the pink carpet at this year's Met Gala. The replica decapitated head was a clutch designed by Gucci worth more than $11,000.
Wow.
But now Leto says he has no clue what happened to it.
So Jared is now jokingly urging anyone who knows where it is to please bring it to their nearest Gucci store in exchange for some sneakers. There you go. And MerriamWebster is schooling the country after a Republican talking point went viral.
Let's hop on this. The dictionary says searches for the term kangaroo court spiked by 11,000% after President Trump used the term in a tweet to describe the impeachment investigation. And one Republican even called Adam Schiff a malicious Captain Kangaroo.
But MerriamWebster defined kangaroo court and said it has nothing to do with the old children's TV show. Captain Kangaroo was not a judge. He got that nickname because of his large pockets, similar to a kangaroo's pouch.
History lesson.
Good to know.
And there's a new development in the growing international controversy between the NBA and China.
China's government is pulling NBA games from state TV after a team executive tweeted his support for pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong.
Now the league's commissioner is supporting that executive's right to free speech. Here's ABC's Trevor Ault.
The NBA has lost one of its largest international broadcast partners, China's state television network CCTV, announcing they will not air any NBA preseason games. The decision coming swiftly after NBA Commissioner Adam Silver voiced support of Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey.
The long-held values of the NBA are to support freedom of expression. And in this case, Daryl Morey, as the general manager of the Houston Rockets, enjoys that right.
The controversy began when Morey fired off this tweet, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong," referring to the massive protests against China in the former British colony. The tweet quickly igniting a firestorm from Chinese fans and its government. The NBA immediately putting out a statement saying Morey's comments have deeply offended our fans in China, which is regrettable. Commissioner Silver now trying to smooth things over. He's headed to Shanghai Wednesday to watch a preseason game and meet with Chinese officials, but he's still defending Morey's right to share his opinion.
Daryl's tweet has hit what I would describe as a third rail issue here in China. I understand that there are consequences. We will protect our employees' freedom of speech.
In a statement, the network says we are strongly dissatisfied and we oppose Silver's claim to support Morey's right of free expression. We believe that any speech that challenges national sovereignty and social stability is not within the scope of freedom of speech.
The NBA is the #1 sports league in China. They have at least 25 marketing partnerships and 200 stores there. Commissioner Silver has acknowledged this issue is not likely to die down quickly. Trevor Ault, ABC News, New York.
Our thanks to Trevor there. And meanwhile, the NBA isn't alone in responding to China over support for pro-democracy in Hong Kong.
Esports company Blizzard Activism has banned a popular professional gamer after he made a statement in support of the pro-democracy protesters. The player, who goes by Blitz Chung, was removed from the Grand Masters tournament and disqualified from participating for the next 12 months.
The 21-year-old university student from Hong Kong was also forced to forfeit his $10,000 worth of prize money. And that's our question of the day. How do you think companies that do business with China should deal with free speech? Tell us what you think in the comments or tweet us at ABC News Live.
Coming up, we'll let you know what's on the horizon for the day ahead.
Plus, we're celebrating a special milestone for one of our own in true homecoming style after this. Here's what to watch out for today. President Trump is scheduled to sign an executive order on transparency in federal guidance and enforcement at 3:15 Eastern Time. You can watch that here on ABC News Live.
A court control hearing will be held for former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort, who is charged with residential mortgage fraud, conspiracy, and falsifying business records, among other charges.
A Montana judge will hear arguments on whether to block President Trump's permit that would allow the proposed Keystone XL oil pipeline to cross the border with Canada. Government and TC Energy attorneys want the lawsuit challenging the permit dismissed. Teen climate activist Greta Thunberg has called the proposed path of the pipeline not morally defensible.
And the NASA ICON mission is scheduled to launch after it was postponed due to abnormal data stemming from a faulty sensor that has since been replaced. The ICON will study the upper atmosphere where Earth, weather, and space weather meet.
Plus, don't forget to tune into the debrief for an update on all our top stories in the briefing room for a breakdown of the latest headlines in politics. Well, today is all about this guy.
Really?
Kenneth Boughton. As we mark the announcement that he is officially the co-anchor of World News Now, America This Morning, and It's Morning
We have a lot of
America.
shows.
We do a lot of TV. We've been celebrating all morning, and the whole team got in on the fun with a tribute worthy of our favorite star. So funny. I was totally shocked by this video because I didn't know that he'd done this.
This was something else, and it just shows you how much fun we have. We like to give you serious, straightforward news, but we also like to have a lot of fun in these early morning hours. And It's an honor. I'm humbled. It's been overwhelming, all the congratulations. And I mentioned earlier that the fact that I get to sit next to this one right here ain't so bad. So
we're so lucky.
It's nice to be finally official.
Right. Finally. We do have a
Finally.
good time, so I'm glad that you're official also.
Thank you.
That's it from us.
Have a great day.